Hello and welcome to another episode of Disney Movie Investigation. If this is your first time watching, welcome to the show. In each episode, we take a look at a movie that is featured on Disney+. On this episode, we are going way back as we take a look at Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And if you are enjoying these videos, I do ask that you please hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified with each new episode. Now, sit back and enjoy this episode of Disney Movie Investigation. So like I said, today we're covering Cleopatra. This movie was released on June 12th, 1963. It is directed by Joseph L. Makovitz, and it is based on the life and times of Cleopatra by Carlo Maria Fernenzo. It was distributed by 20th Century Fox with a budget of $31.1 million with a box office return of $57.8 million. But let's take a look at the backstory. So Walter Wagner had a long desire to produce a biographical picture about Cleopatra, and he would pitch the idea to several studios, including Monogram and RKO Pictures. He would also approach Elizabeth Taylor and her husband Michael Todd about producing the project along with United Artists. At the same time, 20th Century Fox was in financial peril, and after big losses after the releases of The Barbarian and The Geisha, A Certain Smile and Roots of Heaven being all box office failures. Studio executive David Brown suggested that a remake of the 1917 Cleopatra film would be a great way to bounce back. In the fall of 1958, Wagner's production company pitched to Fox Cleopatra, Justine, The Dud Avocado, and The Fall, and Fox would produce the first three, and Cleopatra was the first to be put into production. Ruben Malloyan was selected to be the director of the film, and for the role of Cleopatra, even though they talked to Elizabeth Taylor, there were other actresses considered, including Joan Collins, Joanne Woodward, Audrey Hepburn, and Sophia Loren. Elizabeth Taylor was contacted again while on the set of Suddenly Last Summer, and she would ask for a $1 million contract plus 10% of the box office gross. On June 28th of 1960, Taylor would sign her contract that included that, and part of her contract included that the film be shot in Europe and that it would be filmed in Todd AO format, a format that was developed with her former husband, Michael Todd. For the role of Julius Caesar, several actors were considered, including Laurence Olivier, Rex Harrison, and Richard Burton. Stephen Boyle was ultimately cast as Mark Antony and Peter Finch as Julius Caesar. So in terms of filming, construction began on the Alexander exterior sets, with London being a viable choice to shoot. However, production head Buddy Adler would enter into a co-production deal with Italian producer Leonardo Santi. Director Mamelin would go on a location scouting trip to Italy and determined that it would be difficult to shoot there, and accommodations would be extremely difficult with the upcoming Summer Olympics. This was further complicated when Italian producer Santi took a full-page ad out in Variety announcing the production without a mention of the American studio 20th Century Fox. This angered Adler, and in retaliation decided to move the production to England, despite objections from producers saying that the poor weather would jeopardize their leading lady Elizabeth Taylor and the labor would be insufficient because of union crews. He was overruled by Fox management. So Adler would unfortunately pass away from cancer, and we would be replaced by Sid Rogel. And filming would begin in September 28th of 1960 in England. But on the same day, the British Hairdressing Union threatened to leave the production because of disagreements with Taylor, as she brought in her own hairdresser, Sidney Garloff. An agreement was reached that Garloff would style Elizabeth Taylor's hair, but he was constricted to doing so in her hotel suite. So more problems with filming occurred as Taylor would shoot a nude scene in 40-degree weather and would become sick with a sore throat and not able to work for 2 weeks. The director was forced to proceed without Taylor shooting scenes that did not involve her, which was extremely difficult. Taylor got even worse, with her cold progressing to become a fever and would be treated by several doctors. This further progressed to meningitis, causing the film to be postponed indefinitely until Taylor recovered. Taylor would ultimately fly home to Florida, and the Lloyd's of London contract would pay her $2 million to cover her medical expenses. So this obviously would cause director change, and Joseph Mankiewicz was hired as a new director. He would ask that the script be rewritten, and the studio agreed to give him 2 months to retool the script. Filming on set was set to resume on April 4th, 1961, but Taylor was hospitalized again with pneumonia. She would recover after a tracheotomy was performed on her throat. On March 14th, the production of 1961, the production was suspended again, and the sets were dismantled at a cost of $60,000. Production was moved to the back lot of California from London, but after a scouting trip by Mankiewicz, he decided to move the production to Rome. At the same time, actors Stephen Boyd and Peter Finch had to leave the movie because they had commitments on other films, but they would be paid for their full salaries for Cleopatra. These roles would be recast by Richard Burton as Mark Antony and Rex Harrison as Julius Caesar. Filming would resume again on September 25th, 1961 in Rome, and Mankiewicz would initially insist on filming the movie in sequential order, which resulted in several actors for long periods of time sitting around with nothing to do. During this time, both Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, who were both married, would engage in affairs that would be the focus of attention of local press, much to the chagrin of Fox executives. So once the movie was completely filmed, there was 120 miles of film that was needed to be edited. The first cut of the film was clocked in at 5 hours and 20 minutes. Fox management demanded a shorter cut by the first week of October of 1961. So a second cut was made with a total running time of 4 hours and 30 minutes. Mankiewicz suggested that the film be released in 2 parts, but Fox declined because they wanted this whole fiasco over with. And Fox would hire director Elmo Williams to supervise the final completion and editing of the film, and the latest cut was down to just over 4 hours in length. So I went over this very quickly with just the bullet points. There is a great book called Fiasco, which goes over this whole kind of behind-the-scenes drama, and it goes into a lot more detail. I definitely recommend if you're interested in this type of stuff. It is a great book. It covers Cleopatra, but it also covers other kind of behind-the-scenes drama of other film shoots. But it goes over a lot of the depth of what happened behind the scenes of Cleopatra. So I kind of went over the main points, though. So in terms of the cast of the movie, so we obviously have Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra. We have Richard Burton as Mark Antony. Rex Harrison as Julius Caesar. George Cole as Flavius, and Rowdy McDowell as Octavian. In terms of the plot, in 48 BC, the young queen of Egypt, Cleopatra VII, seduces Julius Caesar, who has just defeated Pompey the Great, and uses her charms to manipulate him and establishes her authority. Little by little, things will work out as planned, and now the ambitious Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, is born. She can almost taste Egypt's long-awaited reunion with Rome and the formation of a mighty empire. However, after Caesar's unforeseen death, the beautiful queen will besiege his powerful Roman general, Mark Antony, leading him to a personal and political demise, as Octavian takes over and wages war on the two lovers. So this movie, even though it had a lot of behind-the-scenes drama, it would win an Academy Award for Best Art Direction and Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, and Best Special Effects. And because of all the behind-the-scenes drama, there was actually another movie based on what happened behind the scenes between Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor called Liz and Dick, and this stars Lindsay Lohan. So in terms of recommending this movie, the movie is very beautifully, very epic, very again, the scenes between Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor are very well done. There's a lot of drama, and you can tell why these are legendary screen actors. Unfortunately, this movie is very, very long. It was 4 hours and 10 minutes long. I was unable to watch this in one sitting. I had to break it up over I think 2.5 days. So it's very long and very tedious at times. If you can make it through the entire thing, the end scenes with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor are very, there's some great dramatic tension there, and they both do some very great work there. But unfortunately, I think the audience is just so bored by the end of it that it's hard to recognize that. So if you're a film history buff, I definitely recommend it. But in terms of a general audience, this is one I'd probably just skip. It's just, unfortunately, a little long and a little boring. So thank you so much for joining us here on another episode of Disney Movie Investigation. I would invite anyone to please leave a comment if they have seen Cleopatra on what they think of it. And as we look forward to our next episode, we're going to take a look at a Disney animated direct-to-video sequel as we take a look at Brother Bear 2. So until next time, I hope you have a magical day, and we will see you real soon.